Hey guys, welcome back to another PianoTales Podcast. My name is Amelia Fong, and today I have a guest. Her name is Anoosha Syed. Anoosha is an illustrator and an author for children's books. I'm excited to learn about her perspective today and understand her process of storytelling specifically for younger kids from the perspective of somebody who does visual arts, illustration, as well as storytelling and how they blend together. As musicians, it's important to understand the heart of music, which is storytelling, through other mediums as well to see if there are any common threads. It's also important because oftentimes our music gets paired to those other mediums, whether it's film, poems, you name it. But I'm excited to learn from Anoosha and about her industry and her creative process. So let's give it up for our guest today, Anoosha. Oh my goodness, it's so good to meet you.
Likewise. Thank you so much for setting this up. My name is Anoosha Syed. I am a children's book author and illustrator living in Toronto. I have illustrated 40 books now, although I'm kind of new to the writing world, which is, I guess, what we're talking about today. My author debut, That's Not My Name, came out last year. I have another book coming out early next year, which hopefully I can announce soon. And I'm working on another book right now, but my main job is being an illustrator, but I also work as a character designer for animation. I also am kind of an educator. I'm on YouTube, so if anyone is interested in the world of like illustrating books and kind of like how I do my job, I have a lot of videos on that as well. But yeah, that's me.
Like, you have such a diverse background because I know you originally studied art, is that correct?
Yes, I got a bachelor's in fine arts and illustration from a school in Switzerland.
So like, how did you hop into the world of writing? Because I know you said that's kind of new for you. How did that come about?
So actually I had always wanted to be a writer. That was like my dream when I was a kid. That was like, I wanted to be an author when I grew up because I was a really huge bookworm. Like, I would read way past my bedtime. That's all I did. I was like a reading kid. But it wasn't until high school that I got introduced to the world of art and I became more interested in like animation and then eventually into books and everything. So writing just kind of fell past. But yeah, after I was like illustrating for like 6-7 years, and then I became inspired to start writing my own stories for a number of reasons. One was that just as an illustrator, unfortunately, there is kind of like, we are not cared for as much as writers in this industry. Like, there are a lot of times where, like, if there's like an announcement of like, oh, there's a new picture book and like an article or something, people will just not mention the illustrator. Or like, there are some authors who will not credit the illustrator. Even in like picture books, sometimes like the author will have their name huge, and then the illustrator is just like teeny tiny inside of the cover. So like, it was stuff like that. But then the other thing was that as a woman of color, like, I found that a lot of the books that I was being approached for were books about like my identity. So books with characters who were South Asian or Muslim. And it was fun at first, but I felt like that was the only kind of book I was being contacted for. And I really felt like I was being typecast, and when I just wanted to draw unicorns and write funny books, but like no one wanted me for that. So again, that's why I decided like, okay, if no one's gonna hire me for this stuff, I might as well just write it myself. And so yeah, that's how I got back into writing again, and I love it. And again, like, it's still very new for me, and I'm still learning because everyone thinks that writing for kids is easy, but it's not. But yeah, I hope that I'm getting better and better as the more books I write.
I mean, that's an amazing journey to hear. Like, I mean, I've seen your illustrations, and it's really great to see that you're learning about like the world of writing. You said that writing children's books, it may seem easy, but in reality, it really does take a lot of work. What are some of the things that you've been learning that maybe you find more difficult, or like takes a lot of work for children's books that may be different than other styles of writing?
So one thing that people really forget is that in a picture book, the advantage that you have is that you have two forms of storytelling that's happening at the same time. You have the words, obviously, that you're reading, but the artwork plays like a huge part, and that adds so much more to the story. A lot of people don't know that in a picture book, you usually have like a maximum of 500 words to tell a story in like a 32-page picture book. For like a even smaller book, like a board book for like babies, you have like maybe 100 words, maybe even like 5 words. It's like really small. And so it's up to the writer. They have to be as concise as they possibly can and put a lot of trust in the illustrator to help tell their story as well, and to cut out as much unnecessary stuff as they can. So for example, if an author writes a sentence like, Billy is wearing a red hat and he walks into the room, you don't need to put in red hat if the artist can just draw the red hat, you know what I mean? So stuff like that. So that's like one thing to keep in mind. The other thing is that, yeah, like the illustrator is key for telling that story, because another cool thing that I kind of learned recently is that there are two forms of telling a story through illustration when you're combining it with text. You have, and I hope I can get this right, that you have symmetrical interaction and you have enhancing interaction. Symmetrical interaction is when what's on the page, what's written on the page is kind of more or less what is going on in the artwork. So again, if you have the example of like Billy walks into the room, what's happening in the artwork is going to be exactly that. But enhancing interaction is when what is happening in the artwork doesn't necessarily match what's in the text, but is adding more to it and more context, more story, more details. And a really great example of this is the book, Sam and Dave Dig a Hole, I think it's what it's called. And it's so good. It's, you're gonna have to like write in who the author and illustrator are, but it's essentially these two guys, they are like, you know what, we're gonna dig for treasure. And it's from it's from the point of view of these two guys, and they're digging and digging and digging, and you see like a cutout of the earth and you can see them digging through, and they're just like, you know, we should give up, maybe we should turn this way, we should turn that way, and they're just not having any luck. But in the artwork you see that like they're digging down, but right over here is just like dinosaur bones, right over here is like diamonds, all this stuff that they're missing. And from the point of view of the text, they're not getting any of that, but the artist is putting in all of these details, and that's where you get the story from, you know what I mean? So again, that's like something that a lot of people miss about writing stories. It really is a team effort, and when you're an author illustrator, you have control of both aspects, which is really, really fun.
No, that's a really cool point that you bring up. It's like something I don't think about, because I had one of my students, she was composing pieces, and then on top of the pieces, she's like, I want to like write the story, and I want to put like little, we didn't have an illustrator, but she's like, I just want to pick out little stickers from like Canva or whatever and stick it in. And I'm like, okay, if we're gonna make this, like, you know, we have to think about how the artwork is going to interact with the story, and then help tell the story on top of the music and whatnot. So it's really cool to think about, especially with your perspective as an illustrator, being able to offer that, because as somebody, like, I also like written too for like younger kids. It's not something that I like think about immediately. I think about like the writing first, but it's important to think about how they go together.
Especially because kids, especially like the age that I write towards, they, for the most part, they don't know how to read yet. And they are either being read to by a parent, or one thing that I absolutely loved when I was a kid was I would sometimes just ignore the text entirely and just look at the pictures. And sometimes just make my own story. And sometimes the stories would match, if like the illustrator is doing their job, right? You can, you know exactly what the story is just by looking at the artwork. But I would just like make my own little stories and just like looking at all the details and everything. So that's an important thing to remember as well, that like, what is the kid going to be absorbing from the text if they are one being read to or just looking at it by themselves?
Especially for like the younger kids, because I noticed that too, like some of my kids that I work with, they can't read, so I'll give them my, you know, my story or whatever, and they're like, well, I can see the pictures and I can play the music with it, and I'm like, oh, okay. So like whenever you are approaching a new story or a book that you want to write, what does that process look like for you? Like, how do you get started with that?
In terms of the writing side?
Yeah, I guess in terms of the writing, or if, you know, planning or whatnot, and then execution.
Yeah, sure. So like I said, this is something that I'm still learning, and I didn't go to school for, you know, learning how to write. I don't have like an English degree or anything, but the great thing is the internet has so many resources out there, so I was able to like learn through that. But all of the guides and all of the info that I was following was like information for writers, like only writers. And so I was following that at first, and I was having so much trouble with my first book of like writing the initial manuscript and just trying to figure it out. But I was having a lot of trouble with it, where for me, like the steps that I go through is just coming up with the initial idea.
Yeah.
And the idea can come from just like knowing, just like from my head of just a sentence summary of what it could be. Or more likely, I'm drawing a character for fun and I'm like, oh, this is really interesting. I wonder if like this character could be in a story, or if I see like something happening and that could be a story, which is more often what happens. But yeah, so I'm following all these guides and I'm writing my first manuscript and it's not really working. And then my agent, who's like working with me, she's like, you know, Anoosha, you are an artist. Like, why don't you, instead of like focusing on just writing out your first draft, why don't you focus on the thumbnailing of just doing those really rough sketches of each page and see if anything changes for you. And what I learned is that that works a lot better for me, where I'm definitely a much more visual person, and I'll find that I will learn more about the story once I get to drawing. So after I do a very rough first draft, I'll get into doing the artwork. Again, very, very rough. It's just stick figures and just figuring out placements, the compositions, any like jokes, because I love doing a lot of the humor within just the artwork that like that wouldn't be set through the text. So once I do like a round of that, I'll be like, oh, okay, the text on this page doesn't make any sense with this artwork, so that needs to be tweaked. Oh, okay, the flow is not really working and like the pacing, so maybe I should move these pages around. So then the artwork that I did would influence the text. Then I go back to the text, fix that up, and then it would just be kind of cyclical.
I like that.
So yeah, which when you're working with, when I'm like an illustrator working with an author, I don't really have that. It's like, they completely finish their manuscript, it gets sent to me to do the artwork, and that's kind of like it. And I don't know if you know this, but when I'm working with an author, we have no communication whatsoever. Yes.
I didn't know that.
A lot of people don't know this.
Yeah.
Yeah, so essentially, like if you are an author and you're looking to traditionally publish, which means not self-publishing, like going through the usual what you imagine of like working with a publisher putting in the bookstores, you would write up a manuscript with your agent, you send it to the publisher. Once you have like an offer from the publisher will pick out an artist who is best suited for your text. So you don't go in with an illustrator.
Wow. Okay.
And this is because the publisher has a better idea of who would be best for the text, and then they can pay them as well, because the author shouldn't incur any of those fees. So like the publisher picks someone out, and this is where I come in. But again, like the author has done their job already. They keep us separate. I only work with the publisher, which would be either the editor or the art director or both of them. And if I have any questions, then they'll ask the author for me, and then it'll kind of go back. And the reason they keep us separate is just for like professionalism. Because then sometimes they might filter questions out from them, or like me from me. And just because like sometimes you'll have situations where some authors might have like a lot of suggestions of like, oh, can you actually do this or this or this? That might not be as necessary.
I see.
Because like honestly, like I wouldn't want them telling me how to do my job because I'm the expert in artwork. Like I wouldn't be telling them how to do their job because I'm like that's their work. So anyway, that's why they are kept separate. But that creates like a really different work rather than when I'm an author and illustrator and I have control of everything.
Yeah.
So that's why I write and then I draw a little bit, write, draw a little bit, and it's kind of goes in a circle.
I like that process of like trying to go back and forth, because like in the music world of things, like it's similar, like the songwriting process with my students, like even for me too, like if I start with the lyrics first, sometimes I'm like, I can't get anywhere, like I don't have the idea, I don't have what I need, I don't have the story, and then like my teacher will be like, just play, like just play, and then it'll come, and then I'm like, yeah, you're right, like my basis is in like playing the piano, and then then the story will come from that.
Yes.
So it's like similar on your end where it's like, drawing first and then, writing and then going back and forth. It's the same thing. So I thought that was like a cool connection. Like, what do you think are just the key elements that make a good story? And then I guess in your industry it'd be maybe kids' books.
It is a big question because I think it's very subjective and it does depend from person to person. For me, it would be, I'm drawn towards more of like the funny books. So I would usually say like the good ending, like the twist or whatever, appealing characters. And this is something that I do struggle with. I love characters, like kid characters who feel like they're kids, which I think is it's sometimes hard to find in a kid's book where I want to read a book about a character and I'm like, oh, this reminds me of like a kid I know in real life. Like they just feel real to me. I find that like really charming and endearing. So I do really enjoy that. Again, as an artist, coming from that point of view, really great artwork I love, and a good, like a harmonious matching between the text and the artwork together, and just if you have like a separate author and illustrator, you can still feel like the text and the artwork work well together. I think those are the things that I look for.
What is your favorite, well, you can go either way, but favorite like book or author?
Sure. I'll go for a book. My favorite children's book is School's First Day of School, which is written by Adam Rex and illustrated by Christian Robinson. I think it has like everything that I was looking for from those key points. It is a funny book. It's about essentially a school. He's anthropomorphic and he has just opened up for the first time, and he's so excited for kids to be in his school, and he's really excited. He has kind of like a kid brain, so it feels, has like that life to him. And it's really funny because he's nervous, like, oh, what if the kids don't like me? And some of the kids are like, I hate school. There are like kids who are drawing on his walls, and he's just like, why do the kids hate me? But at the end of the day, like some of the kids are excited to go back, and the school talks to the janitor who cleans him up and everything. And it's just really sweet. It's really funny. And I think, like for me, it's a book that I just admire so much, and has the author and the illustrator are both people I really admire, and I really recommend everyone to check out.
Well, I gotta check it out. I haven't seen it before.
It's great. Yeah,
that's so cool. Well, I just wanted to thank you for your time and like answering questions and like giving more insight into your industry, and then being new in this industry for writing specifically, like your thoughts on that as well. It was really insightful. Like I love it because I've been interviewing a lot of people who have a background in music, but I was like, I really want to like interview people who are in the writing world, like the writing industry and storytelling through not just words but also the art. So I was really happy that you had a background in art too, and how the two interact with each other. But yeah, this is really nice. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much for inviting me. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye. All right, that was our episode for today. Thank you so much for joining me and Anoosha for this episode. Until then, keep on creating.